This week I read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And as I got into the book, I began to realize that there's just a lot of material there, and it was going to be very difficult for me to make a video at the end of the week after having just kind of read the book this week. So after each little bit, I stopped and I recorded a video, recorded my thinking, and I decided today, as I was going back and looking at those videos again, that I would, for this week's video, just kind of make a compilation of all the different videos. So you will this week see just me processing what I'm thinking as I'm reading it. Please know that I never knew when I was recording these that I would be making them public. So show me a little grace. I'm looking pretty rough in some of them. Some of them I'm laying in my bed, about ready to go to sleep. Probably not the best idea, but yeah, I'll edit as best as I can, but I'm going to just go ahead and jump right in and join me as I think through some things from this book. If we don't do the basic work of defining the kind of people we want to be in language that is stable and consistent, we can't work towards stable, consistent goals. Those are among the opening words of Ibram X. Kendi in the book How to Be Anti-Racist. And that is really a challenge to stop, and it has challenged me to stop and think about what exactly do what kind of a person do I want to be? And to have an actual language, a definition that says what it is, so that, that can be stable and consistent, and my actions can be stable and consistent. He spends the first part of the book kind of defining what certain words mean, and I found that interesting. By his definitions, I mean, even though I would consider myself not racist, maybe I am. He says, racist, you can only either be racist or anti-racist, because if you are, people are pulling up, because if you are anti-racist, you are actually fighting. You are not, a racist person doesn't necessarily have to do something. A lot of times it's their inactivity. It's what they don't do. It's the fact that they don't stand up against policies and ideals that are racist. Anti-racist will stand up against those policies and ideals. Racist is anything that promotes inequity among people. So sometimes discrimination, what we would call reverse discrimination, it is discrimination, but it is anti-racist because it is promoting equity among races. And of course, I've talked about that. We understand that not everybody has the same starting point in life. And that's kind of what he would say. If you, if consistently people of color, Black people, have, they don't own their homes, or they have smaller wages, or they have shorter lifespans, this is inequity. And if you promote policies that strive to bring equity, then that is anti-racist. Anything short of that is racist. And I just quickly want to read a quote from Lyndon Johnson, said in 1965, "You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bring him up to the starting line of a race, and then say you're free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair." And that kind of goes back with the whole idea of the starting places not being the same. So the author's parents came from like a poverty situation, and they got an education, and they worked their way up to the middle class, and were kind of, as time went on, and as they got into professional careers, and they were taught to they were encouraged to teach other Black people, how they did it, to kind of teach them the rules, assuming that if you were not able to do that, to climb that ladder, that it was because of laziness or poor morals or lack of work ethic or something like that. And in fact, the author talks about, that's kind of, in some ways, the environment in which he was raised. He talks about the fact that when he was in high school, he won a speech contest, and was years later mortified to hear how many racist ideas were in his speech, as he talked about the need for teenagers to kind of, Black teenagers specifically, to kind of pull it together, to, start acting in the right way so that they could have better lives. Just, again, kind of assuming that it was their own fault that they were that way. So we tend, the idea is that we tend to assume that it is poor work ethic or laziness that keeps people down rather than policies. And probably part of the reason for that is because we see people, we interact with people. They are in our faces, so to speak, whereas policies are kind of distant, and we don't always realize the policies that are out there that are keeping people poor and keeping them from being able to climb the ladder. They're breaking the rungs, so to speak. History has shown that racist policies tend to promote racist ideas. We have, I guess, always thought that the ideas come first, that people have these ideas about the inferiority of certain races, and that leads to the policies. But really, history shows that the policies came first as a way to protect self-interest, and then ideas were taught as a way to justify those policies. In fact, surprisingly, this is something I guess I didn't know or ever thought about. It was like not until the 15th century that race was even really thought about or considered a thing. And I can't remember the name of the guy, I'll have to look, said that, he's the one who kind of categorized. You had white people kind of at the top of the hierarchy, and then yellow or Asiatic, and then red or native, and then last would be African or Black. And then he kind of gave the qualities of those people as he saw them. Obviously, the white people being superior and the Black being the least, with kind of a continuum. But up until that point, it was not something that was really thought about. So it seems that prior to the 15th century, people were identified by the way they gathered together, more like their language or their religion or their customs. But it was, and physical characteristics as well. But it wasn't race, as in a group of people who held this set of qualities that made them either superior or inferior. Okay, so let me see if I can get this right. I took a break after reading, and I probably shouldn't have, but there's actually very little difference between humans. I mean, we are all basically the same. I think it said like 1/10 of a difference between humans. So to be anti-racist is to be able to say there is very little difference. However, to say that there is no race, you can't go there. You can't do that, because we've already made race a thing. And if we try to say that we're all the same and there's no different, then we cannot acknowledge that there is huge inequities in the way people are treated. And so we have to do both. We have to, on one hand, say being human is being human. And basically, from a physical standpoint, we are basically the same, but we have created this thing called race. And we've got to acknowledge now there are races, and races are treated differently. It's the only way that change can be made. This book is so dense. I'm going to really struggle to get through it this week. And even then, I realize it's a book that I'm going to eventually have to reread just because there's so much here. You know, the chapters are dealing with, you realize there are so many components to this thing called racism. It's not just about the color of your skin. The chapter titles are everything like biology, ethnicity, body, culture, behavior. Color is one of them, class. And then the chapters begin with statements about what a racist attitude looks like towards that and what an anti-racist attitude looks like towards that. So it's interesting. Later on we'll be getting into topics like gender and sexuality and failure and success. And I don't know, we'll see what this holds, but there's just so much here. A lot to take. So much of this book is personal narrative. Kendi goes back and forth between talking about his personal experiences to, citing studies, and it's very academic. But, he really, throughout the book, from the time he is a child through his adult years, he is working and struggling to make sense of why things are the way they are. Why do white people hate black people? What is to be done about this? You can see, if you go through, there's just a progression in his way of thinking, and he's really just trying to figure things out. I would imagine if you read some of his early works, it would be very different than this work. Would be interesting to see what he says now in light of the current administration. So I have to be honest with you, I am not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and sometimes I had to reread things over and over and over. I'm a slow reader. I am not a fast reader. And sometimes the way he worded things, I was like, what? Could you say that in an easier way? I do believe that, a lot of, I get what he's saying, and I fully believe that we really should try to understand the perspective of other people, kind of seek to understand as opposed to being understood. What a goal to live up to, but golly, at times he made it really hard, if I'm being honest. I'm not completely sure that I agree with Kendi's assertion that you are either racist or anti-racist. I think that sometimes there is such a thing as just not knowing, just being uneducated. So you can't say, well, if you are not actively pursuing anti-racist policies, then you are racist. But you could say you don't fully understand, a person doesn't fully understand how certain policies affect other people. And maybe that is not excusable, but I think it is fair to say that. So it's good to continue to educate yourself and to read and to listen to other perspectives, to see, ways that you can grow in the area of justice. But again, I don't think lack of knowledge or lack of understanding is necessarily racist. There are some new ideas that came to me, like the idea that desegregation in schools could have a harmful effect. And according to Kendi, Martin Luther King Jr., really, he liked desegregation in every area as far as, buses and restaurants and things like that. But when it came to schools, what it really meant is that black children or children of color were having to integrate themselves into a white culture in a place where they were not valued, and basically putting the growth and education of black children into the hands of white people, where the Black children were not valued. And so that presents a problem. And so there's a problem when we fully integrate and we, ask Black people to assimilate into white culture, then it is no longer, it's no longer a Black culture. It's basically a group of white people, at least that culture, but people with different color of skin, if that makes sense. So maybe Black spaces and white spaces are not necessarily bad as long as they're equal and as long as, you want to see each other as equal. You want equity between the groups, but the last thing you want is for Black people to think that they have to become basically white people with dark skin. So really, desegregation needs to be voluntary, and it needs to be valued, and it needs to be welcomed for groups to intermingle, but no group needs to feel like they have to become part of another group. And cultural differences need to be valued as well. So as I acknowledged throughout the course of the week, there really was a lot in this book, and I think that Kendi grew a lot too. I mean, it began with him, as I said, a teenager with, his own racist ideas, and his, you can see the progression of his thinking as he grows older. And it would, I tried to see what I could find out about him even now, and I didn't have a lot of luck. I see that he has changed and has just recently moved to a new university, but I would love to hear some of his thinking now, because he seems to be just constantly searching and seeking and growing, and I appreciate his work. Like I said, it's one that I will have to pick up again, because it was a lot to try to take in one week. So thank you for joining me, and I'm not sure yet what I'm going to read next week, but join me next Sunday and you'll find out. Thanks.